right, another San Francisco 49ers game in the books, another comfortable win. No late game point spread shenanigans this time around, but it's a safe bet that things will get much more interesting across the rest of the NFL Week 3 slate. Here to break it down with us from a betting perspective, none other than pro bettor Las Vegas Cris. You can find him on the BetUS NFL show alongside Steve Fezzik and Jared Smith every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Also on YouTube, Cris does a great job not only sharing picks, but a lot of strategy, unique topics, and angles you're going to be hard-pressed to find anywhere else. You can follow him on YouTube at Las Vegas Cris, also on the platform formerly known as Twitter, on X, at Las Vegas Cris, no H in Chris. LVC, it's been a minute since I had you on this show. Glad to be reconnecting. Welcome back to Props and Hops.
Great to be seeing you again, buddy. How's it been?
It's been pretty good, and I've got to say it's fun getting a glimpse into your garage as we're having this conversation. So for anybody with us live on Twitter or YouTube or checking this out on Spotify, it should be in video form as well. A nice glimpse of what's going on behind the scenes at the Las Vegas Cris household. I don't know if that's a victory cigar based on any of your bets tonight, or is that just part of the post Thursday Night Football routine on a weekly basis?
I lost 2 quarter-unit bets on the Giants' first half and full game, but I won that back in college football, so I basically juiced out, which was disappointing, but starting off in the huge hole for the weekend in NFL. We'll get it back. We'll get it back.
If history is any indication, that's probably a pretty safe assumption. And I'll note before we dig in any further, for the audience that's with us live on YouTube and on Twitter, feel free to weigh in with any questions or comments, and we'll look to work that into the show wherever possible. Cris, I know from a betting standpoint, things didn't go your way tonight on Thursday Night Football, but beyond the betting results themselves, any instant takeaways from what we just saw transpire between the Giants and the 49ers?
I didn't watch any of the game. I really try not to. I think one of the things I've learned early this year is I don't want to be watching the games again because I just get so infuriated with all the randomness and variance with referee calls and everything. So I kind of watch it through Twitter whining and moaning and chirping, and I get a good feel for what goes on in the games. And it seems like the Giants had a few, quite a few penalties against them, and then a couple of tipped ball interceptions. So it was a variance the wrong way tonight. So we'll get one the other way soon, hopefully.
And looking beyond the variance that can rear its ugly head within the scope of any one football game, Cris, we've seen 2 full weeks in the books already. Any top takeaways from a betting standpoint from what you've seen so far in the early going this NFL season?
It seems like every year we get to game 2 and there are quality teams we expected to make the playoffs that are not only 0-2, but looking at 0-3, like your Chargers and the Vikings. One of those 2 is basically going to be out of it. So that's kind of disappointing. It just seems like the injuries just mount up faster and faster each year. It'd be nice to get rid of that AstroTurf, I think, is the one thing that I've learned, because a little bit more bitching about that, and probably with good cause, with the kind of, with the billions of dollars invested, plant some seeds.
Plenty to be said for that. And I've got an angle I'd like to run by you as well. I think when I reflect on the season's first couple of weeks, I can reflect on the notion of the point spread as the great equalizer, as they say, and the notion of the best team possibly being overrated and the worst teams possibly being underrated. I think of a team we just saw win convincingly once again tonight, the San Francisco 49ers. You could make a strong argument they're the best team in the league. And at the same time, I wonder if there's going to become a point at which they might be overrated. I've kind of oscillated on them so far this season. A lot of that to do with Brock Purdy and his ceiling corresponding with the team's eventual ceiling. I think what we saw in week 1 was really impressive. I was ready to give the Niners a big bump. And then week 2, while it was a thorough win and in a iffy backdoor cover to cost the Niners the point spread victory in that game against the Rams as well, Purdy had some pretty big misses, including 2 big ones in the fourth quarter on third downs targeting Deebo Samuel. There was a walk-in touchdown that Purdy missed that turned into a long field goal. There was an easy first down pickup that turned into a punt. Tonight, I think Purdy was good. I think it was a mix of skill and luck, and that seems like the story of his career to this point. I don't mean to discredit anything that he's already accomplished as Mr. Irrelevant, but one of the plays that to me best represents his career to this point came in the second quarter. I know you didn't watch the game, but this might not surprise you if you've seen Purdy on tape. Debo was blanketed, and Purdy threw it too many way. A pass was tipped up in the air, and it was caught by the Niners' Ronnie Bell for a big gain. It easily could have been intercepted. I just feel like there's a lot of skill and a lot of good fortune when Purdy's under center for the Niners thus far. I don't doubt San Francisco is going to go far, but I do have my reservations about ultimately how far they can go with Purdy at the helm. How do you evaluate the limitations of a quarterback like Purdy, but also the way he slots in pretty well to Kyle Shanahan's scheme and the just massive talent edges the Niners have up and down the rest of their roster?
I think Shanahan's going to put him in positions that eliminate as much risk as possible. If he becomes a little bit gun shy or incapable, I think Shanahan will make some adjustments to make it a little bit easier. I just worry that the health of the team in general, because they don't have a lot of depth like they have in years past, and they're like Baltimore, the two teams that cannot stay healthy. I don't know whether it's a conditioning issue, but they're certainly solid right now. And if as long as they can get adequate play out of Purdy, I think that they're okay. I think they would have won this game anyway, regardless. So there's no sour grapes on the game. But they're solid. They're solid. No doubt about it. They're my number 2 team right now.
Yeah, and I don't mean to knock them too much. I mean, they've, again, had 3 convincing wins in 3 weeks so far. So they have a rightful claim as being the best team in the league. I just wonder if at a certain point that might get them overrated a little bit. And on the other side of the spectrum, Chris, I want to talk about a team like the Arizona Cardinals, where they were expected to be historically bad this season, and some people still might contend that they're the worst team in the league. They're definitely among the bottom dwellers. And I wonder if part of them possibly being underrated could be the tanking narrative often gets overblown. The players on the field are not going to be part of that process to the extent that it is even real elsewhere in an organization. And whenever we've got pro athletes truly competing out there, it's hard to think any team would necessarily be a pushover. So what are your thoughts not only on the possibility at times of the best teams being overrated, but the worst teams being underrated when we consider, again, the point spread as the great equalizer at the end of the day?
Well, we did think that Tampa Bay was going to be dumping, and they're in a great position at this point with 2-0. And the Raiders could have dumped, and they're looking okay, even though they had a tough, bad loss last week. I think that they're a 3-point favorite against what's considered a decent team. Arizona obviously showed up in both games. You got to remember, these people have to play for roster spots. The average career is 3.5 years. You can't be they're not going to sit there and dump and lay down and jeopardize their career. They want to have a roster spot. So, you can only do so many things. I don't think very many players are out there to lose, especially on those bad teams. What do they care? They want to impress. So you can't underestimate that these teams are going to show up and, have a little bit of backbone. What I worry about is for my metrics is there are bizarre metrics coming out that I feel are going to take weeks and weeks to kind of settle down, because some teams have played way over expectations and some have played way under expectations. And if they are the teams that we think they are coming into the season, I'm worrying about my model being able to catch up on it because some of these results are extremely skewed. It's only been 2 weeks, and I don't take my model seriously until after week 4. But I'm worried about it adjusting over the next 2 weeks to where it needs to be on a few teams.
That makes it an interesting time to have you on this show, knowing that your model is not fully up to speed yet, kind of by design, as you just laid out. But as we look at the rest of the week 3 slate, Chris, I'd love to transition into the segment where we can talk about our favorite sides of the week. What's one team that you like against the spread as the board currently stands recording this conversation on Thursday evening?
I like 2 sides quite a bit. I like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers quite a bit. I think that line is still high. And Tampa Bay's got a veteran club. And Mayfield has worked miracles. This guy has shown passion and is developed loyalty amongst his players at an extremely high level. And when you have that going, and when you have veterans behind a quarterback that is enthusiastic like he is, and I just see Monday Night Football. It's going to be hot. It might be raining. Philadelphia, with their two new coordinators, just don't have everything, quite firing on all cylinders. And I think we're going to at least see a decent roll out of Tampa Bay. I don't know how many weeks they can keep it up, but I believe that the style of play that they have is going to keep this game close. And I think they even have a shot of winning. I've been very impressed by them, and I think just the Eagles are just unstable at this point. They're obviously a good club. They just win, baby. So they're kind of skating by, and we'll see this week. I think it's interesting. I think it's just an unexpected team that might be a little bit of a Cinderella story after this week if they can pull out that victory. And another surprising team. I mean, geez, what happens if Denver goes to 0-3? That's going to be chaos. I mean, you've got no shot at the playoffs, basically. But very quietly, what my model does is it does a very good job of measuring the full performance of the team. It doesn't focus on the same stats that a lot of people focus on. And it picks up a lot of areas that are often ignored or undervalued or overvalued. And I think it does a good job of equaling them out well. And Denver's doing a lot of things well. And when you see that in a team, it's maybe not what your eyes or what the results have shown so far, but they're doing so many things well. I just believe that they can hang with Miami and be disruptive to what Miami does, and pretty darn good considering Judy didn't even play in game one. So Wilson didn't even have a true number one to throw the ball to, and they were kind of sloppy, but I think that they can pull it together. I think they're doing enough to actually be there and show up, and the game is just so crucial to them. You've got a veteran quarterback, a veteran head coach, and I think they're going to bring their A game there.
All right. Well, the side that I had identified was the first one you touched on. I know that we didn't rehearse this, but I thought based on what I've heard from you on other platforms this week that we might be seeing eye to eye on Tampa. So I won't belabor the point there. I think you made a strong case for the Bucks. I also hear you on Denver. And for those catching the show right now, I think it might be worth noting not just what the prices are. Tampa Bay +5 hosting Philadelphia, and then Denver +6.5 at Miami. Chris, is it fair to say for Tampa, currently at +5, that one's good to +4.5? And then Denver, if the line's currently 6.5, maybe want to embrace some asymmetric risk and just sit tight on the off chance any sevens reappear, and worst case, consider to go at 6 or better. Does that sound like a fair way to outline the price floors for both of those games?
I saw that Denver was slipping in too many places to 6. So, I basically had to, share that at 6.5 or 7, depending on the price. I'm holding +7. I would have taken +6 if I had to. So it's still in a range that I think is a level that's worth their wager, so to speak. And Tampa Bay, I would take that all the way down to 3.5.
All right, so still some wiggle room on the Bucks, especially. And on that notion, Chris, I'd love to dig into a topic that I've tried to develop the framework for as being just because you've missed the best of the number doesn't necessarily mean that you've missed a bettable number. And of course, whenever we're talking about betting, it all comes down to the odds, the price, the number you're getting. So getting the best of the number is of utmost importance whenever we possibly can. But if you didn't get the +6.5s on Tampa Bay and now you're looking at +5, doesn't mean the ship has sailed. If you didn't get +7 on Denver and you're looking at 6.5s right now, doesn't mean the ship has sailed. So keeping in mind that we do want to get the best of the number, but we also don't want to leave value on the table out of stubbornness, would you say that maybe it's just a bigger bet when you're getting the best of the number and you scale down a bit when you're getting something that's still bettable but not peak value? Or just overall, how would you describe your point of view when it comes to getting the best of the number versus making sure that at the very least you're not missing out on a bettable number?
Well, my number one priority is to have my wagers placed at numbers where a better number doesn't become available afterward. That's my number one goal. As far as where a line opened up, sure, I've got bettor's remorse when I miss numbers, but it matters what my numbers say. So, some people are really stubborn and say, oh, if you miss this number, you're a donkey if you bet it. You could have had this. And I absolutely disagree. Some way, somehow, I usually try to find a way to be involved in that game, and maybe I'll change the way I'm going to bet the game if I missed a key number. Maybe I'll tease a layered parlay or a layered teaser, so to speak, and I'll be able to not only have the number that I missed, but additional value. So there's other ways if you actually miss the point spread to still get those numbers covered, and that's a lot of what I do is basically try to just isolate certain games. If I can't get the numbers I want, if I don't want to lay 3.5, if I don't want to take plus 2.5, and I want that 8.5, well, then I'm going to, spread them out by time, and I'll leave the first part of my wager isolated, and basically, in my mind, substituting a point spread bet into a money line or a teaser leg, and that's the only goal, is let's cover that first leg into stuff I'm betting anyway later on.
Fair enough. Well, when you talk about liking Denver as one of your sides this week, we've got both of our good friend Richard Palma in the chat noting that Denver versus Miami has lots of cross-coaching dynamics going. Chris, when there's that potential level of familiarity across coaching staffs, how much do you account for that relative to a game in which that coaching crossover wouldn't be in place and you're just looking at the talent on the rosters or the coaches more so in a vacuum?
Well, you would think that the defense for Miami is going to rally and make their best effort, obviously. But, there's a lot of things that have changed on Denver, obviously, with the completely new coaching staff. So, it's probably going to be a benefit for Miami a little bit, but that happens all the time. And the dynamics of the strategies and such change so fast anyway. You have to hope that they have this factored in and account for it properly in their game plan. Pretty much where I am is if you try to digest too much into each situation to the point of micro analysis, I just don't find value in the NFL handicap that way. I think it's you got to look at it from the overall larger concept of how are these teams playing and what are the situations. But little dynamics like that, you just don't know. You just don't know.
Well, speaking of larger dynamics and tying this in with your well thought out answer to my question about not punting on a bettable number just because you may not have gotten the best of the number, you mentioned teasers being part of your strategy, and we've got a lot of options in teaser territory when we look at the week 3 card right now. Right now, if we consider that classic Stanford Wong model crossing through 3 and 7, I'm seeing a handful of teams. Jacksonville able to come down to -2.5 hosting Houston. The Jets up to +8.5 hosting New England. New Orleans +7.5 at Green Bay. That's kind of split between +1 and +1.5, but for those books offering +1.5, the Saints are squarely in teaser territory. Baltimore also an option, coming down to -2 hosting Indianapolis. And then Pittsburgh up to +8.5 at Las Vegas. Among these teams, or perhaps anything a little outside the box for you, Chris, what would you say is your top teaser right now as the week 3 board currently sits?
It's very important to me that I stagger teasers. So I don't want to marry teasers and parlays. And what I mean by that is I don't want them starting at the same times. I don't want any wasted legs, so to speak, generally. This is a tough week to do that because you've got no late games that fit in a teaser category. You've got Pittsburgh, but that's kind of sitting at a 3 at this point, and that kind of nullifies the use of the teaser. And then you don't really have Monday. So it kind of leaves me in an unfortunate situation of basically looking at the Jets, the Saints, and maybe Baltimore. Maybe I might just do like a 3-team teaser, even though they're all starting at the same time. If you're getting plus 160 on a 3-team teaser, and it's quite possible you can get plus 170 or 180, plus 160 is better than laying minus 120 on a 2-team. So I'm kind of thinking instead of kind of parlaying or parlay teasering them together, I might just throw in one 3-team teaser this week with those 3 teams and take the plus 160 or better.
And to your first point, from a strategic standpoint of looking to stagger your teaser legs where possible, just to hammer home the concept, that is so if you've got multiple games you really like and one of them happens to go down, it doesn't torpedo your options for that second option that was really viable as well. Is that a fair way to summarize it?
Yeah, exactly. So, if I have an early bet, if I had a big bet tonight, let's just say, rather than putting a full unit on it, I might break 2 quarters off and put those into 2 separate teasers that are staggered, get the extra benefit, and only bet half as much on the straight bet. It basically, in my eyes, gives me free value either on the money line or the teaser, and I'm betting that anyway into stuff later on. That if the front end loses, I don't, hey, it was going to lose anyway with the point spread. That was going to be a loser regardless, and it doesn't hurt my back legs. So that's why I stagger them.
Right. Totally hear you there. And then for the record, when you went toward a 3-teamer at plus 160 or better, those teams you identified would be the Jets plus 8.5 hosting New England, New Orleans plus 7.5 at Green Bay, and then Baltimore minus 2 hosting Indianapolis. Is that the correct 3-teamer that you've identified here?
Yeah. Yep. I don't like Jacksonville will probably cover, but I'm a little bit committed on Houston at over 10, so I don't want to bet both sides on that.
Got it. Well, that lack of any exposure prior to this conversation on Jacksonville or Houston is probably what led me in the direction I'm going to go. And for me, it's a bit of process of elimination at the start when we've got this many options. And I think there's a lot to like about the Jets and that really low total. I mean, we're talking like preseason type of totals with the Jets-Patriots game in the mid-30s. And that said, when I see New England shaded toward the 3 and that Bill Belichick, Zach Wilson dynamic, if I'm looking for my top 2 teaser legs, that's just enough to cross off the Jets for me this week. With the Saints, I'm still not quite sure what to make of Jordan Love. Not only are we early in the season now where the market's less efficient, but there's a lot of variance around unknowns at a key position like quarterback. So just a nudge to keep me off the Saints. Again, if I'm identifying my top 2 legs right now, not to say that the Jets or Saints don't bring a lot of promise to the table, but I'm going to rule them out. And to your point, I'm also going to rule out the Steelers because those Raiders minus 2.5 are heavily shaded toward the 3. And that leaves me with the Jags minus 2.5 hosting Houston, paired with Baltimore minus 1.5 hosting the Colts. I think with the Ravens.
Wait a minute. How come I get minus 2 and you get 1.5?
Oh, good call. Let me see. Did we have any movement recently?
No, you gave me Baltimore minus 2.
We might need to go back to the drawing board. Okay, there we go.
You're not playing with kids here,
toes, Chris. Yeah. Who said 2 is a dead number? All right, so we will go ahead and update the record. Make it Jacksonville minus 2.5 hosting Houston and Baltimore minus 2 hosting Indy. Yes, you and I should play the same lines if we're recording this at the same time. Baltimore, like clockwork, they're bitten by the injury bug, and I know that that's a factor looking forward for them this season, but I was impressed by, I think, a pretty nice statement win last week at Cincinnati, Joe Burrow being injured and all. I think the Ravens were quite impressive. And really in both legs of this Jags-Ravens teaser, I'm looking at the superior team at home needing to do little more than win outright. And I think it opens an opportunity to speak to teasers versus moneyline parlays, because I think a lot of people might just see favorites in the range of Baltimore and Jacksonville and say, hey, let me just do the moneyline parlay and safely assume they're both going to win outright. And this teaser is getting it virtually the same outcome. Yes, it's possible that the Ravens or Jags have a 1 or 2 point win that affects the teaser, but would cash the moneyline parlay. But really, the moneyline parlay is going to cost you in the range of minus 190. And the teaser, if you can shop around at all, you can probably get down at minus 120, if not a touch better. So I think that's well worth the trade-off to sacrifice a game landing on 1 or 2 to save 70 cents via the teaser. Is that a calculation that you often make when your consideration comes down to a moneyline parlay or a teaser as well, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always plugging in various combinations on money lines versus teasers to see exactly what the difference is on those prices. I'm surprised that that's minus 190.
I shopped it around a bit, and I think it was in the range of minus 180 to minus 190. But a lot of times, just some money lines, especially looking at Jacksonville, it was pretty inflated, it seemed, relative to the teaser value.
Yeah, boy, geez, I didn't realize these were so high. That's nuts. Yeah, I guess you're right. So yeah, you have to go with the teaser in this situation. It's just too cost prohibitive otherwise.
And with this week's board, it's not just confined to 6-point teaser options. If we want to look at 6.5-point teaser options, which I would consider good at minus 130 or better, the Chargers right now, a +1 dog at Minnesota. If you can get them up to +7.5 in a game where we're looking at two teams that love nothing more than close games, getting either team above a touchdown has lots of appeal. The Saints, if you're looking at a book where the spread is only +1, 6.5 points to get them not only to, but through the key number of 7 could make a lot of sense. And then, Chris, I know you're good about thinking creatively when it comes to teasers, so got a couple outside the box options to run by you. Similar concept for both the Browns and the Lions. Both of these teams can be teased up to +3.5. So it would be Cleveland +3.5 hosting Tennessee, or your Detroit Lions +3.5 hosting Atlanta. And if we're looking at teasing from -3 to +3.5, I know that 0, 1, and 2 are relatively dead numbers. So that can be a major fly in the ointment. And at the same time, the -3s that we're seeing right now for Cleveland and Detroit are heavily juiced toward 3.5. Teasers don't account for juice on the point spread, so it's almost crossing through the 3 twice, in effect, kind of like getting 7 points for the price of 6.5 when we look at the Browns and Lions. So, Chris, between Cleveland and Detroit with that angle, or the Chargers and the Saints, would you say that there is any preferred two-team 6.5-point teaser that would catch your attention on this week's board?
Well, in your situation, I actually had somebody bring up a similar situation on one of the games, and I pointed out to him, take a look at your alternate line, because your alternate line on +3.5 is much cheaper than what you're going to spend, because each leg of a teaser is $2.80. Make sure you check the alternate lines first, because in those two instances that you brought up, the alternate line is possibly cheaper. So if you have a site that allows you to parlay alternate lines, or an alternate line with a money line, it gives you a lot of options. So I'm always looking. Every week I'm parlaying alternate lines with each other, or alternate lines with a money line or a point spread. I'm mixing them all up, determining where is the absolute best value that I can find for each situation. So, don't just limit yourself to teasers. Take a look at what you can do with the alternate lines. It's very tough. You've got to have some reasonable shops, because most of the alternate lines are absolute highway robbery at the main shops. But if you've got some offshore outs, you can find some decent alternate line prices. And then even some of the legal shops, just not the big legal shops. But some of the other ones, the more competitive ones like Circa and Superbook and stuff like that. But I'm not sure that they let you parlay those or not. So, but you should find out. You should know. You should absolutely at least flinch those bets to see if it's in your, any of your shops are going to let you do that, because it's very powerful. Last week I had Denver +3.5, so that Hail Mary was very nice to me.
Significant to some, is somebody in the media space might say. And I think to your point about shopping around for this, I hear you. And as a pro bettor, I would not be surprised if you've got more outs than most people could possibly keep track of, and an encyclopedic knowledge of how to compare the value of money lines versus teasers versus alt lines. I feel like myself and probably a lot of listeners to this show wouldn't have anywhere near as many accounts, hopefully still more than one or two. And there are tools like Unabated that go a long way in helping to compare value of different bet types. But thinking about it from the standpoint of somebody who is not a pro bettor, but that classic phrase, an aspirational sharp, as I believe Captain Jack Andrews coined, is there a percentage of books that you would say that are, if somebody's listening to this and has a few books scattered across the regulated market in some of the more popular offshores, is there a certain percentage of books that you would say it could be possible to get down on these angles, like parlaying alt lines and things of that nature, knowing that some of the mainstream books won't have that in their offerings?
I believe FanDuel lets you do it. I don't think DraftKings does. And for the life of me, I don't know why, because the odds that they're giving you on these from the go are just not even worth considering, quite frankly. In fact, sometimes I'm looking at them to see if there's a scalp on them that they're so far off. So again, I spend probably 20%, maybe 25% of my football focus perusing alternate lines. That's what I do. And it's the 99% a waste of time. But the 1% that is worth my time makes it entirely worth my time.
Well said. And Chris, one more question I've got for you when we're on the topic of teasers, because I really appreciate your outside the box approach to all this, would be considering factors like totals for a game, or again, the VIG on the point spread that teaser juice doesn't really account for in most cases. And when I think about totals, I look at a game like Chargers Vikings, where high totals can reduce the relative value we get in each point, because whether totals in the mid 50s or the mid 30s, we're still getting the same 6 points. And 6 points is obviously a smaller percentage of a game like Chargers Vikings, where the total is 54. And another factor that I closely look at, the VIG attached to the point spread, I feel like that can affect the relative value we get and crossing through the 3. Again, 2 examples this week, the Patriots minus 2.5 against the Jets. That's not shaded too heavily toward 3, but I'm seeing minus 115s at Circa and Bookmaker. So that's a good indication of where the market's probably going to settle. And then the Raiders minus 2.5 against the Steelers, minus 125 at Bookmaker. So that is really heavily juiced. That essentially is a 3 if we want to compare it to flat minus 110 VIG at a lot of shops. So when it comes to high totals or 2.5 point underdogs with the spread shaded pretty heavily toward the 3, which of those factors matters more as you're considering teasers to go ahead and proceed with getting down on versus teaser legs to avoid?
It's a tough call, because last year I had a lot of rotten luck. I was actually rooting for lines to go against me in some cases, so that the teaser was my only option, because I was losing games on the 3 and the 4, taking plus 2.5 or 3. And I was landing on 4, 5, 6. And like, I've had it, and that's one of the things that led me to staggered parlays or teasers. Is I'm getting sick of this. I am not going to put the kind of money that I put entirely on a point spread anymore when I can layer them. And it's just, it's infuriating to lose your entire bet when you could have had it in a teaser and have it and you're playing that leg of the teaser as if it is a straight bet. So that's why I, split my bets up now. And in those situations with the strong 2.5, 3, it's a case by case basis, basically, and how passionate I am that I need to have money on that game. If it's a full blown play, I just don't know. I take it each one separately, because if the line is that 3, you are donking off some value, so to speak. But some people might say, "Oh, well, if it's a 3, you get that. You can go up to the 9." Well, the 9's useless. It's a complete wasted number that hits 1% of the time. So you mentioned the 1 and the 2 not being that valuable. Well, now they are valuable. They are hit for 4% each. So that adds up quickly, and you can tease through the zero in some situations. Not all situations, but it is at least a look. And I grew up thinking never tease through zeros, and that's not true necessarily. So, you know what? I can't even answer your simple question because it just goes on a game by game basis, and just I go by feel, and that's all I do it.
And when you talk about going by feel, I'm wondering if I need to embrace that approach a little bit, because when I look at, again, that Jets-Patriots line and I see New England shaded toward the 3, it's ever so slightly. It's minus 115 VIG attached to that 2.5. But that really cools me off on the Jets. And at the same time, when we're looking at a total of 36 and a half, that low of a total might be worth well more than the downside of 5 cents of VIG shading this line toward the 3. So I don't want to be robotic in my approach. And again, leave a bettable number on the table. Do you think if I were to pass on the Jets just on principle that the line is slightly shaded toward the 3 for New England, that's too stubborn of a way to approach it, and I should take it a little bit more by feel and look at the low total and other factors beyond the juice on the New England minus 2.5?
Yeah, it's pretty hard. If you like the Jets, you're basically should have a portion of it on a staggered teaser, if at all possible. Even if that thing's sitting on 3, I would probably want at least a portion of my wager on a teaser, even though you can't do everything by the book. And it's important to know what you're doing and how much value you're giving up, and you have to consider the utility value of what you're doing. And utility value is, you can't measure it, Matt. Nobody else can. It's what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to accomplish, and how I have my wagers compartmentalized and what my goals are. So while on the surface I may be costing myself value, my perspective is it's isolated and I'm getting these points and they're crucial for me. So that's what I weigh each time. And with a total of 36 and a half, that's a lot of value.
Well said. Well, Chris, I appreciate not just the breakdown and specific picks on this week's board, but the strategy that people can apply indefinitely into the future when it comes to teasers or other derivatives along those same lines. I also want to keep things moving along and make sure that we can touch on props when it comes to what week 3 has got to offer. So, Chris, what would you identify as one actionable prop as you currently see the odds posted for week 3 in the NFL?
Listening to Props and Hops every week. That's my only prop. I don't do props.
You duped me before the show. I caveated. I said, hey, I know you don't normally do props, but what do you want to do there? And you said you had one. So you got me. You got me. I did. Line and sinker. All right. So
yeah, but it's no joke. I mean it. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I will still take that as a compliment, even though there's a little bit of a wink and a nod there, no doubt. I'll run something by you that, let's put the number aside and acknowledge that you're not a prop expert, but just conceptually want to see what you think about an angle here at a high level. I'm intrigued by Dak Prescott passing yards over 230 and a half this week, and it's one I haven't touched yet. I did want to run this by you. Looking at his numbers so far this season, week 1, 143 yards on 24 attempts, a lot of that dictated by Game State, and a 40-0 win over the Giants. Week 2, again, driven by Game State, a 20-point win over the Jets, but he posted 255 yards on 38 attempts. I think the bull case here is that week 1 and 2, Dak's output was suppressed by how the games happened to be going, and he cleared this number against a stout Jets defense last week with less than 40 attempts. So even if Dallas is blowing out Arizona, Dak might get there just based on a natural game plan McCarthy wants to call. And I also think of Dave Malinsky when he was talking about basketball teams that were in a groove or well-rested, often having a coach that still wanted the team to stretch its legs. And I wonder if it's time for McCarthy to really get Dak a full game or closer to a full game of really pushing the envelope a bit, get him into regular season form and open up the playbook so that he's getting his reps, if nothing else. I feel like there's maybe a bull case there for Prescott passing yards this week. And of course, the bear case is that, once again, Dallas is a double-digit favorite, and another blowout is squarely on the table to possibly take the air out of the ball. So, Chris, just conceptually, do you have a gut reaction one way or another on how you would anticipate something like Dak Prescott passing yards playing out with Cowboys at the Cardinals?
You know what? You hope to think, and since I'm holding a 50-1 ticket on McCarthy as coach of the year, I would hope that injuries are to be avoided at all costs. So trying to get out of games healthy should be the goal. They lost Diggs today, and that's a knock. Hey, we got to take care of ourselves. So I just hate the idea of any coach having their players press needlessly. Now we do live in an era of monster comebacks. I think Arizona gave up a medium-sized lead last week, didn't they?
Medium, to put it lightly. Yeah.
So, I mean, you do have to be cautious, but when you have the ability to run run the darn clock. And I hope that that's their strategy. Hey, I'm to answer your question. How the hell am I going to know? And how the hell are you going to know what his game plan is? It's when you're playing bad teams like that. A lot of the times, those look at all the breakdowns Arizona had against Jones in the second half. You get a couple of breakdowns for huge gains, and you're giving up 60 yards here, 50 yards there, and yards can come up in bushels real quick on just busted up plays. So. That's the best answer I can give you. I don't know what the hell they're going to do. I hope they run clock, and that should be the strategy.
I don't know what the hell they're going to do is pretty much the canned response I should have anytime anybody asks me what I expect in any NFL game, because a lot of this, and this as well as anybody as a pro bettor, it's usually a case where I find people talking with so much certainty that they might know less, and the humility and sometimes lack of conviction is a sign that somebody's actually trying to apply critical thinking here and is aware of the inherent randomness and unknown involved in this whole endeavor. So I wasn't trying to present that as a case of, well, of course, McCarthy's going to let Dak loose this week and he's going to keep him in the full game regardless and stay aggressive. I just think we're always looking as bettors for, not a definite, but maybe a 55-45 instead of a coin toss. When we look at the odds, just trying to find 1 or 2% edges here and there, letting those add up over time is the name of the game.
Yeah. You know what? Most of the people in this gambling space and even the mainstream sports space are just full of themselves and making up nonsense because, unless Greg Cosell's telling you something, or maybe one of the commentators for the actual games of what the strategy is going to be, and they've heard it firsthand. Everybody's just speculating and full of shit. I mean, there's nobody in the gambling space, when they're pontificating what they think is going to happen and what they think is the game plan. They don't know what the hell's going on. They're wasting our time. What do you know? Why do you know that? That's what you think. We don't know. None of us do. The ex-players and ex-coaches don't know. When they're out there on ESPN, they're wrong, over and over and over again. Those are the people that are closest to these teams. There's a lot of, personalities in both genres, so to speak, that like to say, oh, well, they're going to do this and they're going to do that. And it's like, they don't know. They're just filling up airtime, and that's what they're paid to do. I don't know shit, okay? And none of the other people betting sports know shit, okay? We're going off of past results, and there's no way in hell that any, real information that's viable and usable gets to us. We might get somebody in the space is going to get an injury leak ahead of people, but other than that, they're not going to know game plans and such, and really be able to turn it into actionable action very often at all. I mean, it's nearly never.
I really appreciate you laying it out in such bold terms and quite clearly, and it's hard for me to disagree with anything that you just said. So I fully realize the irony here, but my follow-up after that, before we close out the prop segment, is to make sure that we do offer something I would say is actionable. I do have in pocket myself, knowing, to your point, I don't know what the hell is going to happen. So don't assume anything is a lock. But something I do consider bettable right now would be one that I deem the props and hops special, shortest touchdown under 1.5 yards. And I love this in games with high totals. So I'm going to go to that Chargers-Vikings showdown. Total 54, by far the highest on the board. More points, good for more touchdowns. More touchdowns, good for the odds of at least one 1-yard touchdown. And if you shop around, you can find this at -155. I'm seeing -160. And Chris, I'll just say that if people watch your show on Wednesdays with Steve Fezzik and Jared Smith, then they probably know of a place where they can get this Chargers Vikings shortest touchdown under 1.5 yards at -160. And I would say that that is a price at which I would play this. I know it sounds like a lot of big delay for something as specific as a 1 yard touchdown, but between penalties in the end zone or the field really getting compressed near the 1 yard line, it happens a lot more than people might think if they're not watching this closely. I've seen games where this year, I think that the Eagles had a game last Thursday night. I didn't pull the trigger on it. It was one of the last games I crossed off for this prop, but I think there were 4 1-yard touchdowns. So we may well see 0 1-yard touchdowns, but I think it's more likely that we would see more than one that get shut out. And if all it takes is one in this case, I know the all it takes is one mentality can be very dangerous with prop bets, but at -160 or better, Chargers Vikings shortest touchdown under 1.5 yards. Any thoughts, Chris, on that handicap, knowing that props are well outside your wheelhouse?
No, I think you summed that up beautifully. The price does, on the surface, seem a little strong. Do we know whether Akers is playing this week? I know he passed his physical, but I don't think they're going to put him in the lineup this week, are they?
I'm not assuming anything meaningful from him, but I have heard definitively. To your point, we're not going to get that info before others do, and it's probably baked into any meaningful numbers anyway.
No, I don't think it makes a significant difference either. And I know Minnesota, doesn't Minnesota have like a combined, like less than 100 yards rushing on the year? It's some absurd low number.
Yeah, the stat that I've heard is that they've gotten more than 90% of their yardage through the passing game. I think I heard that from Payne on Bet the Board earlier today, and maybe somewhere else in the sports media ecosystem as well this week. But with their explosive pass game and knowing the Chargers secondary and what J.C. Jackson tends to do from a decision-making standpoint, I would not be surprised to see PI in the end zone. And then
on either team
won't really flip that ratio for Minnesota, but it would be enough to get the job done here.
Yeah, but on either team, because with that Minnesota defense, Herbert's going to be throwing the ball. So
better be.
The same thing can happen on both sides of the ball, as far as I'm concerned. So I would lean that way for sure, no doubt.
All right. Well, the first comment we got in the chat from our friend Richard was Herbert time, and wasn't sure if we'd get there, but Richard, we made it. You were ahead of us with that, so well played. And there's the token Justin Herbert reference for this conversation. We'll see how my beloved Chargers perform on Sunday, and if Brandon Staley is still calling the shots come Monday.
So is he canned if he loses this game, or can he lose another one?
I mean, after the Jacksonville debacle on the heels of how he approached playing Mike Williams and all his starters to an extent in week 18 last season, the fact that he made it to this season tells me that there's a longer leash than I would have anticipated. So far be it from me to say definitively. If they lose, I think it might depend on how they lose. If there are a bunch of more explosive plays and it's just another Chargers being the Chargers, I think that's wearing really thin. If it happens to be a pretty clean and well-played game on both sides, I don't think he's necessarily in as hot of a seat as is being spoken of by a lot of others in the space this week.
Yeah, it kind of just sucks because those two teams are pretty good. They're pretty good, and I think it's quite possible that a surprise happens and the Bengals could be 0-3. And that'll be another shock to the system. So it's going to be an interesting weekend with the two all but assured playoff teams, possibly 0-3.
Yeah, plenty to look out for. And Chris, we will continue the conversation in a moment in terms of some betting process, possibly actionable insights people can apply to their betting portfolios for week 3 in the NFL. Before we get there, I would like to remind everybody that I am partnering with Right Angle Sports this season with an affiliate deal to help drive signups for their service. And I'll note that Right Angle Sports has earned a reputation as the gold standard for picks from pro sports bettors with an unmatched long-term success record, market influence off the charts. And I'll note that there's something for everybody here at all levels. If you're just starting out, they've got an NFL Game Day Sunday package with a couple of bets. And it's not just the NFL. The first couple signups from this audience have been skewed heavily toward college football and some late week service plays. And of course, for more serious bettors, there's a way to get every release all season long in the NFL and or college football. So if you're interested in supporting Props and Hops by supporting Right Angle Sports, I've got a custom link I created. It's tinyurl.com/raspicks. If you're catching this on YouTube or in podcast form, that link is in the show notes. And on Twitter, that link is in my bio, as well as the Props and Hops pod bio. To sweeten the pot, let's get a little entrepreneurial here. Feel free to DM me on Twitter with a screenshot confirming your subscription via the Props and Hops link, and I'll go ahead and confirm that with the team at Right Angle, and then would be happy to personally reimburse you 10% of what you end up getting down with Right Angle Sports. And to be clear, Chris, before I go any further here, I do want to note that most big selling services aren't really worth the time of day. I think there are a few rare exceptions. I would put Right Angle down as one of them. I think they've got just an impeccable reputation, according to a lot of the pro sports bettors that I know and trust the most. A lot of guests on the show, I think, would echo that sentiment. And don't want to lead the witness too much. I know that you, as a pro bettor and doing what you do, if there's any sort of conflict of interest here, feel free to plead the fifth. But I'd be remiss not to ask you your experience or point of view on Right Angle Sports as well.
Oh, well, I've known Ed for 15 years. So, through DMs and AOL Messenger back in the day. So I respect those guys a lot. And, obviously they branched out into NFL this year, and they've done it all along, but they're trying the full season NFL. And it'll be interesting to see how that goes, because the NFL regular season is, that's a whole nother animal. And if anybody can do well and overcome the barriers of being successful, I think those guys can do it. But I do a pretty good job of it myself. So I'll just leave it at that. And I think both of us will do very well this year.
Yeah, well said. I think that while Right Angle is one of the rare exceptions, they're not necessarily the only one. So if those who follow Chris want to learn more, go ahead and check that out as well. And Chris, we got a compliment as I teed you up for that question from G-Stack George Sofidis in the chat. George, thanks for catching us live, complimenting the cigar. And I know nothing about cigars, but the way I can nerd out on beer, I'm wondering if there's anything you can share about what kind of cigar you're working on right now, or what kind of cigars you tend to gravitate toward in general.
Well, with the I lost an earpiece. Where did that go? Anyway, I hit a homeless guy over the head and took his Philly that he had taken. No, I'm kidding. I'm just smoking regular garbage tonight. I actually have some really nice Cubans that I've been saving for a rainy day when I stop. And I need to start breaking those out a little bit more. But tonight I'm slumming it. And even my Jim Beam is in a Vitaminwater bottle. It's easier to carry.
Oh man, that might be a pro move also, just to get away with it when you're out of the house. And then we've got Richard Love in that owner. Too cheap, too tired to pay. Yeah. Well, we've covered the cigars more than I ever have in any episode of the show.
Cigar prices have doubled. I mean, they have literally doubled. I used to have nothing but Cubans, and I'm not paying $16 for something I was paying $8 for 5 years ago. It just, it's negative EV to me.
Yeah. Well, I think plus EV, more love for the Jim Beam and the Vitaminwater bottle. If nothing else, we can take that away from this conversation. Might have been a losing night with the way Thursday Night Football played out from a betting perspective, but some winning tips in betting and in life, I think, will live on from this show.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just can't wait until we get the model working in order, and we're up nicely on the year so far, and I know some people are struggling, and it's going to be up and down. What a lot of people don't realize about the NFL season, and it didn't really register to me, is that I looked back through my recent years, and as many as 10 weeks of the 18 weeks are basically break even. So your whole season profit, you're going to have a handful of losing weeks, and you're going to have winning weeks, and they're going to be significant on both sides, because at least half of the year is going to be nothing. Like last week, I won 0.18 of a unit. after 22 plays. So fits right in. Had a good week 1, 0.18 of a unit last week. And there's going to be another 7, 8, 9 weeks of something within 1 or 2%. And then you just have to be there and for the good times, and you need to have a couple of extra good weeks than you do bad weeks, because there will be bad weeks.
And when it comes to looking to make the most of good weeks, or at least stack the deck in your favor to make it through the test of time, knowing there will be bad weeks involved in that journey, I'd love to dig into one process-driven angle now that we've given out some picks across sides, teasers, and props, and really see how I can apply a roundup of takeaways that I try to bring to this show from what I consume across other betting content. And Chris, an angle I want to bring up tonight actually stems from a bit of a throwback. I think I heard AJ Hoffman on an old episode of the Dream Preview bring up a subtle edge that a lot of sharp people with long track records in the space can probably endorse as well, where if we have teams that are about to kick off in prime time, then there is asymmetric risk betting against them for their matchup the following week. And unfortunately, we've seen a few examples where that's come into play already this season, where we had the Aaron Rodgers injury on week 1 on Monday Night Football, the Nick Chubb injury week 2. And if we look at Dallas week 2 against the Jets, that line was Cowboys minus 3.5 right before Monday Night Football kicked off week 1. With the Rodgers injury, Cowboys closed minus 8. And then Tennessee this week hosts Cleveland. Titans Browns was lined at plus 3.5 right before kickoff. And let me just make sure I've got my facts straight. Tennessee does not host Cleveland. This game, is in Cleveland. So let's get the record straight. Cleveland is hosting Tennessee. Titans were plus 3.5 flat when Monday Night Football kicked off between Cleveland and Pittsburgh. Currently, 3.5s are still out there, but they're really juicy here. And we're talking about a lot of juice attached to the biggest half point in betting. So that Chubb injury does matter. Chris, any thoughts on this concept of if you do like a team that's going to play a Monday Night Football team the following week, to go ahead and lock that bet in? Because yes, a team could look like a world beater on Monday night, but 1 or 2 key injuries, and that could really skew the point spread. And there's a really long tail to that effect potentially.
Originally when these future week opportunities came aboard, I was like a kid in a candy store, very excited. And I have found that it is a complete and utter waste of time to take these positions ahead of time. There just is too much that works against you some way, somehow, more often than you can forecast. And I have noted a handful of people on various podcasts or mediums state that they've taken future positions, and everyone that I've heard so far that has come to fruition has been a poor choice. And why put yourself in that situation? You're supposed to be positive EV, and you're putting yourself in what I consider a high variance type of position. You don't have all the facts. You don't have enough facts to make a true positive EV evaluation. Nobody knows what the injuries are going to be. Do you know who's going to get injured this week? I don't. So it just, for me, I don't even look ahead. It's too tempting. And from personal experience, the juice doesn't equal the squeeze, or the juice isn't worth the squeeze, however you want to term it. And I hear it from other people all the time about these great positions, and they sound great, and they just don't come out that well. And they don't really make a difference in the win or the loss in the long run, more often than not either. So yeah, maybe you get 2 points. Did it make a difference? No. What about all these other games where you took a position plus this and you could have had a better line? So to answer your question, I don't care. I just don't care.
All right. So the juice isn't worth the squeeze there, but it sounds like from what you've shared already in this conversation, the bourbon may be worth the squeeze as we look to
the hops as absolutely
we start around the stretch. I love recording this with the cigar and Jim Beam and vitamin water bottle setup that you've got going on right now. But if this would not qualify as your finest drinking experience, since the last time I had you on the show prior to the Super Bowl, How would you describe your favorite drinking experience over the past 6 months or so, probably at some point during the NFL offseason?
You know what? I was very fortunate. I was extremely fortunate. Derek Stevens invited former top five winners, anybody that had finished in the top five or had won, major prizes in Circa, to a private dinner during the Circa weekend. And and I was fortunate enough to sit at his table. We were enjoying some nice wine and some great conversation with some fellow former winners. And that was a really good time. Really enjoyed that. I don't get out of the house often. So that sticks out like a sore thumb of great satisfaction and just an amazing example of Derek Stevens and his like needless generosity. Just we are people like that. He's the last of a species. I mean, Vegas was built on Benny Binions and Steve Wins and other people that you used to be able to run into. And now it's corporate, and Circa is not corporate. And, Derek's the type of guy that's sitting at the bar, greeting and meeting people. And he's happy to, he absolutely enjoys it. And he's a last one. He's probably the last one. So if you guys are ever visiting Vegas, look him up. He'll be at the bar, and you can shake his hand, and he'll be happy to chat with you. And it's just really, really, really nice. It's really a nice part of Vegas.
Well said. Well, Chris, I know we've gone over the 1 hour mark. So one final question for you here. I really appreciate all the time and insight as always. Let's weave in the Malinsky Minute as well. And when I think about betting opportunities this week or so far this NFL season as a whole, I think of something Dave mentioned to me, it kind of offhand at one point, but it stuck with me and I didn't fully grasp the concept at the time. I was much earlier on in my betting journey, but he talked about the value of having what he called a get back book. And an example of a get back book that I can apply to this season would be going back to last week. Again, it's a week 2 bet, but this is an evergreen concept that will apply in the future, probably for something in week 3, once we get news on Joe Burrow or some other big time injury status. But Monday afternoon last week, Chris Jones signs his contract with Kansas City. The Chiefs immediately steamed from -2.5 to -3. There were some 3.5 that showed almost immediately. Having a full-time job, not being glued to the screen all day, every day, I wasn't on this news the moment it broke. But I do have a book that tends to be just a little bit slower moving than a lot of others. I was able to pick off one of the last 2.5s for Kansas City, and the game closed 3, shaded toward 3.5 for the Chiefs. So it was great that they covered despite all the turnover woes. But based on that closing line value, I know CLV does not guarantee anything, but give me 2.5 on a game that closes closer to 3.5. And I'll say that's a good bet, regardless of the outcome, any way you want to slice it. And Chris, getting to the question here, we hear about line shopping and outs ad nauseum in this space, but to take it a step further, what's your point of view on the variety of types of accounts worth getting as opposed to just the sheer number of accounts worth having?
Well, you have to have a mix of square shops and sharp shops because you need all those available lines. Sometimes you have a game that is only available at your square shops. Your for lack of a better term, the granddaddies, the big ones here in the U.S. that that are the monsters. You want those square shops because they're going to have different lines than a Circa or a Bet Online or a Pinnacle or a Cris. And there's usually one way or the other that you want to go. And just because sharp shops have a better line for you, it doesn't mean, depending on what you're doing, that's not the place to go. But the importance of whatever you're going to be betting has to be at the best available number, and you have to have that mix of both of those. For me, the quantity is great. I have more accounts than I actually need. It's actually hard to keep them all active, but quantity is extremely important, but variety is extremely important also. But if I had to choose, like if you said I could only have 4 shops, 2 each, 2 square and 2 sharp, my requirement is to absolutely have, Pinnacle and, like a bookmaker. I have to have those, but I definitely would prefer quantity, because the quantity, you should be able to get square shops just by just naturally, because they all can't be sharp like Pinnacle and bookmaker. So the quantity actually covers both of them, if that makes sense.
Sure. And when it comes to not only sharp versus square, but now a lot of shops might have auto movers, so they're all moving kind of instantaneously, sometimes on air. But have you also found that there's some variety available in terms of sharp and square aside, how timely books are to move, one maybe being pretty immediate and one that might be a little bit lagging, so you have that get back option in your pocket should you want it?
Well, absolutely, but it's also the offerings. You want to have the offerings that are best. As I talked about alternate lines, you need to have a bookmaker, you need to have a bet online, you have to have a Pinnacle, because the regular square stateside places, they're robbing you. They're just not treating you fair. It's not even close, 99% of the time in often cases. So just looking for a fair shake. And it's really hard to find any book that you can, get over on, so to speak. Just treat me fairly is really the goal. Give me some shops that just treat me fairly.
Well, when it comes to getting a fair shake, Chris, I think you always deliver on that promise to your audience. So we'll start to tie a bow around this conversation. And before we get out of here, just a quick promo note to the audience. If you're still with us, then clearly that's a sign that you are enjoying the show. If you're with us on YouTube, I would ask that you take a quick moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you can get notified whenever we go live throughout the course of the season. If you're with us on Twitter, please like this post. You can repost it. Follow Chris at Las Vegas Cris. That's CRIS. The show at Props and Hops Pod, and myself at Lay of the Landis. If you're catching us in podcast form, please take less than 5 seconds to leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It would also be great if you could subscribe to ensure the show automatically appears in your feed as new episodes drop. And last but not least, however you're listening, please consider supporting this show by supporting Right Angle Sports. Again, my custom link for this show.
Or me. You can support me too.
RAS picks. We'll get there, Chris. We'll get there. tinyurl.com/RAS picks. If you're catching us on YouTube in podcast form, that link is in the show notes. On Twitter, the link is in the bio. And to Chris's point, you can absolutely support him too. Follow his work with the Bet US NFL show, Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. YouTube and Twitter at Las Vegas Cris, no H in Chris. Chris, am I missing anything else before we go ahead and close this out?
2 things. Here's a little nugget for you. Punch in Las Vegas Cris with an H and have some fun with that website. I've been meaning to tweet that out. And boy, I should have tweeted that out sometime because that's certainly far more interesting than my site. But Tuesday, I do a process video with my friend Ron from Ron A Sports, where we basically we take a quick look back at each week and we go through the current week of NFL, and we're just shooting the shit. We do zero prep. We know that there are people watching, so it's a little bit, we soften it up a little bit, but we're basically talking through games like we used to before we had a show. So it's entirely different. It's not boring stats and predictions and this, that, and the other. We're just talking about observations and things that we're looking at. And I think that's great quality content. And the viewership grows every week. And we really appreciate people, and we encourage people to have their questions. And then the Bet US show on Wednesday with Fezzik and Jared Smith, which I love doing. And then I do another show with Ted, Ron, and Ted is from Sports USA Live, 25, 30 years in the business. And we actually get a chance to throw some questions at NFL players. and not the BS questions of, oh yeah, well, yeah, we gotta take one game at a time sort of stuff. We're trying to get some sort of like feel into the clubhouse or perspectives and stuff that might be actionable. And we did have games last season where it was clear, that we got answers that told us what we needed to do to make a wager that week. So kind of interesting there too.
Yeah, I think that that's really good context behind something I tried to cover on the top about your channel offering content that really gets into, yes, there are picks involved, but also a lot of unique angles and concepts that people will be hard pressed to find anywhere else. So yeah, Tuesdays with Ron, and then later in the week with the full gang for, I think you guys call it the NFL Blitz series, if I'm recalling correctly.
Inside
a
Blitz.
nice way to kind of bookend the week. The Inside Blitz, there we go. Again, all of that available on YouTube at Las Vegas Cris. And one more thing as we wrap this up, a programming note to the Props and Hops audience. I will be traveling for work next week, so the day and time of our episode is TBD. My best guess right now, Thursday, mid-afternoonish Pacific time. I'll announce that on Wednesday via the Props and Hops handle on Twitter. And with the default schedule moving forward this season, I'm considering calling an audible here. Leading up to the season, I talked about planning on Friday midday shows, but I'm eyeing Thursday nights like this for a couple of reasons. First off, being a little bit selfish, it's easier for me than breaking up a workday, and that task switching can be really taxing. I really want to protect the quality of the show and deliver the best possible product to you, the audience. And number two, when I'm seeing the feedback from the audience, the numbers are telling me that Thursday night could work really well. The downloads, the level of engagement was really strong the first time I did this with Hitman a couple weeks ago. We've had a lot of good chatter from the YouTube audience tonight. And I think if we want to make this show a bit of a Thursday Night Football post game, or at least having it in people's podcast feeds first thing Friday morning, maybe a better way to reach people in the right time, the right mindset. Always going to be a bit of a juggling act with guest availability, and I am firm on making this show the best it can possibly be. Just also trying to stay flexible on how to achieve that. So if you've got any thoughts or preferences, please let me know. Always want to make sure that ultimately I'm here to bring you as much value as possible. So Chris, one last time, I want to thank you for the time and insight, and to everybody who's still with us, thank you for watching and listening this week. Enjoy week 3 in the NFL, and best of luck with your bets this weekend.